As you know, Tom Emmer is the House Majority Whip, and he's a fantastic person, real leader. Comes from an interesting place, a place that's under investigation by our great Vice President. They're finding a lot, and Tom Emmer was one of the biggest complainers about what was going on in Minnesota and lots of other places.
This is like the arsonist trying to claim credit for the work of the fire department, because Tim Walz let this fraud happen under his watch. Whether he was complicit in it directly himself or just turned a blind eye towards it, we really did not get much help at all from the governor's office. Where we did actually get some help was from some state, local law enforcement officers who we assigned to the federal task force because the state government wasn't doing anything. So all credit goes to people on the ground, the federal officers, the state officers who are working to uncover this fraud.
Tim Walz has a serious problem tonight, and it is not just political noise. It is not just another argument on cable news. It is not just Republicans and Democrats throwing words at each other for attention. This is about public money. This is about trust. This is about programs that were meant to help children, families, and vulnerable people. And now, according to the growing investigation, those same programs may have been used as a doorway for massive fraud. And that is where Tim Walz comes in. Because the biggest question right now is simple. How did this happen under his watch? How did fraud allegations grow this large in Minnesota while the governor's administration was supposed to be watching the system? How did these programs expand? How did money keep moving? And how did so many red flags appear before the public finally started hearing the full story? JD Vance is now putting Tim Walz directly in the spotlight, and he is not using soft words. He is saying investigators are looking into whether Walz and Minnesota officials ignored warning signs, failed to act fast enough, or allowed this mess to grow while taxpayers were left in the dark. And let me be very clear, Tim Walz does not get to act surprised now. He does not get to stand in front of cameras and behave like he just discovered the problem yesterday. So when you are the governor, leadership is not only about taking credit when things go well. Leadership is also about answering hard questions when things go wrong. And something went very wrong here. Before I continue, please do one thing right now and like this video and subscribe to this channel, because I am going to break this down clearly, calmly, and without sugarcoating anything. If you believe public officials must be held accountable when taxpayer money is allegedly abused, then hit that like button now, subscribe, because this is the kind of story the mainstream media may try to soften, twist, or bury under political excuses. Done. Good. Now let's continue. The first thing Tim Walz did wrong was allowing this scandal to become this big before real accountability became unavoidable. This is not a small clerical error. This is not one missing receipt. This is not a little confusion inside one office. Federal agents have been involved. Businesses connected to publicly funded programs have been raided. The investigation is tied to alleged fraud in programs meant to serve children and families, and once federal law enforcement starts moving like that, it means the situation has already become too serious to dismiss. The second thing he did wrong was trying to control the narrative before fully answering the questions. According to reports, Walz credited state agencies for identifying irregularities. But JD Vance and federal officials pushed back, arguing that federal investigators were the ones driving the crackdown. That matters because when a scandal breaks, the public does not need a governor trying to win the public relations battle. The public needs the truth. The third thing he did wrong was failing to give people confidence that his administration had strong oversight from the beginning. Because this is the uncomfortable truth. Fraud does not usually grow overnight. It grows when people are careless. It grows when systems are weak. It grows when leaders are too slow, too distracted, or too politically afraid to ask hard questions. And if Tim Walz wants to defend himself, then he should answer one direct question. What did your administration know, and when did you know it? Because that is the question that can change everything.
Well, Tim is a fraud. Look, he's allowed this fraud to take place, and for him to even suggest that he and his administration are part of notifying, they had nothing to do with this. This was the Department of Justice. This was Homeland Security. This was the FBI issuing search warrants. Look, they raided over 20 facilities that are operated by Somali fraudsters, leering centers or daycares, if you will, and autism centers. This has been a long-standing investigation that now is resulting in actual action. And you know what, Kevin, when I saw that, when he put that out trying to take credit for something he has absolutely nothing to do, the first thing that came to my mind was, what does Tim Walz know? Because he clearly wants to suddenly be in front of the crowd screaming to clean up the fraud. Look, at best, this guy is a complete and total incompetent. At worst, he's corrupt and complicit and should be held responsible to the full extent of the law.
Tim Walz is now facing serious heat, and this is exactly why the pressure is growing. Representative Tom Emmer is accusing Walz of trying to take credit for uncovering the massive fraud investigation in Minnesota, when, according to Emmer, Walz and his administration had nothing to do with it. Emmer says this was the work of the Department of Justice, Homeland Security, and the FBI, with federal agents issuing search warrants and raiding more than 20 facilities connected to the investigation. And that is the problem for Tim Walz. If federal agencies were the ones moving in, serving warrants, and exposing what was happening, then why is Walz acting like his administration deserves credit? That is the question now hanging over him. This is not just political noise. This is about taxpayer money. This is about public trust. This is about programs that were supposed to help real people, while alleged fraud was allowed to grow under state leadership. And that is why Emmer's attack hits hard. He is not only saying Walz failed, he is saying Walz is now trying to rewrite the story. At the center of this is one brutal question. What did Tim Walz know? If Walz knew nothing, then critics will say he was incompetent and asleep at the wheel while fraud spread in Minnesota. But if he knew more than he is saying, then the situation becomes even more serious, because it raises questions about whether his administration ignored warning signs. Either way, this is a bad look for him. JD Vance has already turned the spotlight on Minnesota, saying federal authorities are looking into whether state officials turned a blind eye to fraud. Now Tom Emmer is pushing the same argument even harder, saying Walz should not be taking credit for something federal agencies exposed. And honestly, that is the part many taxpayers will find insulting. You do not get to lead a state while fraud allegedly grows under your administration, then suddenly step forward when federal agencies act and pretend you were the one who cleaned it up. And that is not leadership. That looks like damage control. And if Walz wants the public to believe him, he needs to answer simple questions. Who first noticed the fraud? When did his administration know? What warnings were ignored? Who approved the money? Why did it take federal agents to move this aggressively? And why is he trying to take credit now? Because this scandal is no longer just about the people accused of fraud. It is now about the people who were supposed to stop it Cree. And that is why Tim Walz is in a dangerous position. And he cannot simply blame politics. He cannot say this is just JD Vance attacking him. He cannot dismiss Tom Emmer's comments as partisan anger. The investigation is real, the raids happened, and federal agencies were involved. And so the public deserves more than excuses. They deserve a timeline, they deserve names, they deserve accountability, and they deserve to know whether Minnesota's leadership failed because of carelessness, incompetence, or something worse. Tom Emmer's message is clear. Walz should not be praised for this. He should be questioned. And that is why this story keeps getting worse for him. Every time Walz tries to present himself as the person who helped uncover the fraud, his critics fire back with one simple point. You were the governor while this happened. That responsibility does not disappear. So as JD Vance confirms the federal fraud investigation and Tom Emmer tears into Tim Walz, the question becomes even sharper. Is Walz panicking because he is being unfairly attacked, or because the investigation is getting closer to the failures inside his own administration? Because right now, this does not look like victory for Tim Walz. It looks like the beginning of a much bigger political disaster.
People who have ripped us off are getting caught, and they are going to jail, just like today. I've said the buck stops with me. And as I know some of you will take that as an open invitation to play politics with every incident of fraud that takes place here in Minnesota, even though I have to tell you, the statistics show it's happening in red states more than here, but so be it.
All right, hold on. We're going to find out. By the way, how come we don't see any of it? Go ahead. Tell us all about it. Tell us about how illegals don't commit crime and they don't commit murder and they all your thoughts that never happen happens in red states. Okay, there'll be discovery, and they're going to find, there's already tons of whistleblowers who went, I made him aware of this. They made Newsom aware of it. They told him. That's their constituency. They're not into busting their constituency. They're not per se into, let's just say, illegals. They don't hang out with them. They don't hang out at the dinners or the country clubs. They're not friends with them. They're not friends with any Mexicans. That's their constituency. So they will fight to protect whoever they think their constituency. It's not like they like Somalians. They just use them.
Votes for them,
yeah. So they're not going to upset the apple cart. Now, look, there's two kinds of criminal. There's a kind of criminal that does what the Somalians do, and then there's the elected criminal who just sort of turns a blind eye to it. That's what they're doing, is kind of a passive criminality. Also, here's the other thing that's interesting about all these guys. This is, job one for you. How come there's no footage of you talking about it? How come it's all the LGBT community and Black Lives Matter? How come I could go dig up 7,000 hours of this talking about Black Lives Matter, and I couldn't find 5 minutes of him talking about fraud, waste, and abuse? So why is that, if that's what you want?
Yeah, a lot of talk about, thugs wearing boots on the streets, taking down the guy who's just trying to make a living, man. Just trying to do right by his family in the back of the kitchen. And they got these guys coming in and taking them away from their families and jobs and livelihoods.
Well, they're ripping infants from the arms of moms. Did you guys know that? And they're throwing them in incinerators. Yeah. Did you know that? Oh, actually, wood chippers, I heard. They're taking moms who are just unhoused citizens or displaced or without papers, and they're tearing their infants away and they're throwing them in wood chippers.
All that's left is the bluey backpack. That's all that's left.
Tim Walz is making the situation even worse for himself. First, he tries to take credit for the fraud crackdown in Minnesota. Then, when the pressure starts rising, he turns around and claims there is more fraud in red states than in blue states. And that is where many Americans will stop and ask, Governor, why are you changing the subject? Because this story is not about red states or blue states right now. This story is about Minnesota. It is about alleged fraud that grew under Tim Walz's leadership. It is about taxpayer money. It is about public trust. And it is about programs that were supposed to help real people. Instead of giving direct answers, Walz appears to be doing what politicians often do when they feel trapped. He points somewhere else. He's basically telling people, don't look only at Minnesota, look at Republican states too. But that is not an answer. And if fraud is happening in red states, expose it. If fraud is happening in blue states, expose it. If fraud is happening anywhere, punish it. But Tim Walz does not get to use other states as a shield while serious questions remain about what happened in his own state. That is why this argument looks like a distraction. The real question is simple. What happened in Minnesota while Tim Walz was governor? If federal agencies had to step in, issue search warrants, and move against suspected fraud, then the public deserves to know why state oversight did not stop it earlier. They deserve to know who missed the warning signs. They deserve to know when Walz's administration became aware of the problem and whether officials acted quickly or allowed the situation to grow. And this is where JD Vance's criticism becomes even more powerful. Vance is not allowing Walz to turn this into a red state versus blue state argument. He is forcing the conversation back to Minnesota, back to leadership, back to accountability. Tom Emmer is also making the same point. Walz should not be taking a victory lap over a crackdown that critics say was driven by federal agencies. He should be answering why the crackdown became necessary in the first place. Because if Walz wants credit for the cleanup, then he also has to accept responsibility for the mess. He cannot stand in front of cameras and act like the hero after alleged fraud grew under his watch. He cannot take credit when federal agents move in, then dodge responsibility when people ask why the system failed. That is not leadership. That is damage control. And voters can see the difference. They know when a politician is answering a question, and they know when a politician is running away from one. Right now, Walz's red state, blue state argument sounds less like confidence and more like panic. Because if he had a strong answer for Minnesota, he would give it. He would explain the timeline. He would say when his administration first knew about the problem. He would explain what warnings were received, who was responsible for oversight, and why taxpayers should still trust his leadership. But instead, he widens the argument. He talks about red states. He talks about fraud somewhere else. He tries to move the spotlight away from his own administration. And that may be his biggest mistake. Because the more he tries to shift attention, the more people will wonder what he is trying to avoid. This scandal is no longer just about fraud. It is now about how Tim Walz is reacting to the fraud investigation. And so far, his reaction is giving critics exactly what they need. They can now say he wants praise without blame, he wants credit without responsibility, he wants to sound tough on fraud, but only after federal action made the issue impossible to ignore. So tonight, the question is simple. Is Tim Walz fighting fraud, or is he fighting the headlines? Because right now, he is not controlling the story, and the story is controlling him.